My name is Skipper, and I've spent most of my life collecting history. For many years, I've searched flea markets, coin shops, auctions, estate sales, and antique stores looking for the next piece of the past to add to my collection. Every coin tells a story. Some stories are worth a few dollars. Others are worth a fortune. It all began one rainy afternoon while Dale and I were sitting in teleconference in my coin room reviewing auction results. On the computer screen was a remarkable coin, a silver testoon from the reign of Henry VIII. Not just any testoon. This one was beautiful. Sharp details. Excellent silver. A coin that had somehow survived nearly 500 years of history. The bidding climbed steadily. $5,000, $7,000, $10,000. I sat back in my chair and shook my head. 500 years ago, that coin probably bought a meal and a bed for the night. Dale looked at me from the screen. And today it costs more than some used cars. The trouble with history, I said, is that everyone wants a piece of it. The auction ended. The hammer fell. The coin disappeared into another private collection. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I sighed. I'll never own one of those, Dale smiled, unless you bought it 500 years ago? I laughed. At first. Then neither of us said anything. The room became quiet, because deep down we both knew something. That wasn't entirely impossible. You see, Dale had already spent months improving that very unusual machine, a machine originally left to me by my uncle. What started as a mysterious brass pocket watch mechanism had evolved into something far more sophisticated. Dale had integrated the device into my computer system. He redesigned the navigation controls, improved the temporal calculations, and most importantly, he solved a problem that had nearly landed us in the wrong place more than once. The original system relied on locating mints. Dale changed everything. Now the controls worked using 3 simple settings: city, year, denomination, much safer, much more precise, and far less likely to leave us standing in the middle of a river or crowded street. Several days passed and Dale arrived from the UK carrying an old leather-bound book he had purchased from a second-hand bookseller. Knowing Dale, that wasn't unusual. The man could spend hours wandering used bookstores. What was unusual was the look on his face. He was excited. "Skipper," he said, placing the book on my desk, "I think I've found something." Inside the cover, and located on one of the front pages, was a picture and information about a very special chest. The pages were fragile. The writing faded, but one passage immediately caught our attention. Most travelers seek kings and battles. The wise traveler seeks markets. For history is not built by monarchs alone. It is built by ordinary people spending ordinary coin. I looked at Dale. Dale looked at me. Neither of us said a word. He turned another page. There was a sketch of London, dated 1544. Beside it was another note. The finest Tudor collection I ever saw was not owned by a collector. It sat unnoticed in circulation. Now I was interested. Very interested. The more we read, the stranger the journal became. Repeatedly it referred to something called the merchant's chest. Not treasure. Not gold. Not jewels. A collection of ordinary circulating coinage gathered during the Great Debasement under Henry VIII. Coins so common that nobody considered them special. Yet 5 centuries later, those same coins would become priceless historical artifacts. Suddenly our mission became clear. We weren't going back to get rich. We weren't going back to change history. We were going back to witness history. To see Tudor London with our own eyes. To hear the language. To walk the streets. To watch the Great Debasement unfold. And perhaps, if fortune smiled upon us, to acquire the very coins nobody else considered worth saving. Every expedition requires funding. But there was no chance I was selling any of my military memorabilia, regimental keepsakes, or treasured family possessions. Those items tell my story. Instead, Dale and I sold duplicate coins, duplicate reference books, and a few extra items from the collection that could easily be replaced. Nothing irreplaceable. Nothing sentimental. Just enough to finance a research expedition 500 years into the past. We purchased authentic trade goods, period clothing, silver merchandise, and everything necessary to pose as small Flemish merchants arriving from Antwerp. It was the perfect cover. Foreign merchants were common in Tudor London. An unusual accent wouldn't attract attention. Strange customs wouldn't raise suspicion. And if anyone asked where we came from, the answer was simple. Antwerp, good master. By the time we were ready, Dale had completed the final modifications to the machine. The dials were set. City, London, year 1544. Denomination, Testoon. The room filled with a familiar hum. Blue light began to glow across the brass controls. The adventure was about to begin. Neither of us knew whether the merchant's chest was real. Neither of us knew what we would find in Tudor England. But we were about to discover something no collector had ever experienced before. We weren't going to study history. We were going to visit it. I stood before the wardrobe and took a long look at myself. I looked nothing like the retired Canadian coin collector who had entered the room an hour earlier. Gone were the jeans and flannel shirt. In their place was a linen shirt, wool doublet, dark cloak, leather belt, and a weathered merchant's cap that Dale insisted made me look respectably forgettable. Beside me, Dale adjusted the sleeves on his own Tudor clothing. Unlike me, he looked completely at home in it. "Spent enough years in Britain," he said with a grin. "I probably look more authentic than half the people we're about to meet." I laughed. "You mean people still dress like that in the UK? "Smart Alec," he retorted. The trade goods were already packed. Over the previous several weeks, I had assembled a collection of items that would not seem unusual in Tudor England. Polished mirrors, fine brass needles, small devotional pieces, leather goods, silver trade bars, nothing that would alter history, nothing that would attract unwanted attention, just enough to earn a living and acquire the coinage we sought. Dale remarked, "Not a bad job for a Canadian." Then, without missing a beat, he checked the machine one final time. The brass dials glowed softly. City, London. Year, 1544. Denomination, Testoon. "Coordinates locked," he announced. "Where exactly are we landing?" "A field near Stepney." "A field. Trust me. I've heard those words before." "Yes," Dale replied. "And unlike the North Sea incident, this one has actually been tested. That's a story I care not to recount." The machine hummed. The room darkened. Blue light flooded the coin room. A swirling oval portal appeared in front of us. Cold air poured through immediately. Not modern cold, ancient cold. The smell hit me first. Wood smoke, wet earth, livestock, and something else. The unmistakable smell of a world that had never known automobiles, electricity, or industry. I gripped the handles of our small merchant cart. Dale smiled. "Ready?" I nodded. Together we stepped through. For a brief moment there was nothing but blue light. Then my boots touched solid ground. The portal vanished behind us. I looked around. We stood in an open field, our arrival, blocked by an old timber barn adjacent to a dirt road. The morning sun was only beginning to rise. Mist drifted across the grass. In the distance I could see church spires and hundreds of chimneys sending thin streams of smoke into the sky. London, Tudor London. Even from miles away it looked enormous. There were no skyscrapers, no roads, no power lines, just church towers, timber buildings, and smoke. Lots of smoke. The sounds were equally strange. Dogs barking, carts rattling, church bells ringing somewhere beyond the horizon. And birds, hundreds of birds. For a moment neither of us spoke. We grabbed a hold of our cart and pulled it onto the road. To our surprise, a woodcutter approached us. He eyed us carefully. "Good morrow, masters," Dale answered immediately. "God give you good morrow." The man nodded approvingly. "New come to London?" "Aye," Dale replied. "From Antwerp." The man pointed ahead with his whip. "Then you'll be wanting Cheapside Market." "Cheapside?" I asked. "Aye. Merchants from every corner of Christendom trade there." He looked at our cart. "Fine wares by the look of it." "We hope so." The old man chuckled. "If you can sell in Cheapside, you can sell anywhere." He pointed toward the distant city. "Follow the road. You'll hear the shouting before you see the market." With that he clicked his tongue and went on his way. I looked at Dale. "That was easier than I expected." Dale smiled. "That's because we're exactly what we appear to be." I glanced toward London once more. Somewhere beyond those walls were thousands of people spending thousands of ordinary coins. Testoons, groats, pennies, coins no one considered special. Yet, I tightened my grip on the cart handle. The hunt had officially begun. By midday, we reached the outskirts of the city and followed the growing flow of carts, pack horses, apprentices, and merchants toward Cheapside. The old woodcutter had not exaggerated. We heard the market long before we saw it. Voices shouted prices. Vendors called out their wares. Animals protested loudly as they were led through the crowded streets. When we finally entered Cheapside itself, the scene was overwhelming. Stalls lined the thoroughfare. Merchants from England, Flanders, France, and beyond displayed cloth, spices, metalwork, books, and food. The smell of roasting meat mixed with smoke, horses, and humanity. We spent the next hour speaking with several merchants and market officials to learn where newcomers might trade. A small fee was required for a temporary pitch, but after a few coins changed hands and several questions were answered, we were directed to an open space along a busy stretch of the street. The location proved better than we had hoped. Nearby stood the shops of prosperous mercers dealing in fine cloth, goldsmiths crafting jewelry and plate, and wealthy drapers whose businesses employed numerous apprentices, clerks, and craftsmen. Not far away were the premises of scriveners and merchants engaged in overseas trade, men accustomed to handling money and purchasing quality goods. The area attracted customers with coin to spend. Dale surveyed the surroundings and nodded approvingly. We could have done much worse. Together we unloaded the cart and arranged our merchandise. Mirrors carefully displayed. Needles sorted into neat bundles. Leather goods laid out where passers-by could inspect them. By the time we finished, the afternoon crowds were already moving past our stall. After weeks of preparation, and with Dale having flown over from England for yet another visit to Canada, we were finally standing in 1544. Dale broke the silence. "Well, Skipper." He looked toward London. "We're here." We began pulling our cart toward the city. The roads were little more than muddy tracks. Farmers passed us occasionally, giving little more than a curious glance. Foreign merchants were hardly unusual. The first few days passed in a blur of trade. Dale and I quickly discovered that our selection of mirrors, needles, leather goods, and small devotional items appealed to nearly everyone who passed our stall. Farmers purchased practical goods when they could spare the coin. Craftsmen examined our wares with professional curiosity, and travelers often stopped simply to talk. To our surprise, the poorer folk were frequently the most generous with their time and goodwill. Many had little money to spend, yet they shared advice, directions, and local gossip freely. More than once, a laborer or apprentice pointed a potential customer toward our stall, without expecting anything in return. The wealthier merchants were another matter entirely. They were polite enough, but cautious. Every conversation seemed measured. Every question was weighed before being answered. Still, those were the people we needed to know. As sales increased, we made a point of listening as much as we spoke. A successful merchant learns quickly that information can be more valuable than merchandise. Whenever business slowed, Dale and I wandered through the surrounding streets, visiting mercers, drapers, goldsmiths, scriveners, and traders involved in overseas commerce. We purchased small items, exchanged pleasantries, and quietly gathered information. Eventually, we began asking about the legend of the merchant's chest. We did so carefully. Most people knew nothing about it. Some laughed and dismissed it as a tale told by apprentices. Others claimed they had heard the name but could offer no details. A few became noticeably uncomfortable and changed the subject altogether. That reaction interested us more than the denials. Rather than press the matter, we tread lightly and listened. Days later, our patience paid off. While conducting business near the shops of several prosperous mercers, we overheard a conversation between two established merchants and a representative of one of London's trading companies. They spoke in low voices, believing themselves unobserved, but certain phrases carried clearly enough through the bustle of the market. One mentioned deposits. Another referred to records maintained by trusted guild officers. Then came the words that caught both Dale's and my attention. The merchant's chest. The speaker referred to it not as a legend, but as an existing institution used by prominent merchants to safeguard funds and valuable documents. Over the following week, we quietly confirmed the story through additional conversations with guild members, scriveners, and a senior mercer who had spent decades in London's trade. Piece by piece, the truth emerged. The merchant's chest was real. It was maintained under strict supervision by respected members of the merchant community and served as a secure repository for wealth, contracts, and other valuables. Access was limited to recognized merchants with established reputations, guild connections, or sponsorship from trusted members of the city's commercial elite. Unfortunately, that meant Dale and I could not simply walk in and request entry. As newcomers claiming foreign origins, we lacked the standing required to gain direct access. Could we eventually reach the chest? Possibly. If we continued trading successfully, built relationships with influential merchants, and earned the confidence of the appropriate guild officials, an introduction might become possible. For the moment, however, the chest remained beyond our reach. Still, the discovery itself was valuable. The merchant's chest was no myth. It existed, and now we knew where to begin looking. The best intentions of mice and men. That old saying came to mind more than once during our second week in London. At first, Dale and I believed that discovering the merchant's chest was the key to our entire mission. The journal had mentioned it repeatedly. Merchants whispered about it. Guild officers seemed aware of it. Surely, we reasoned, if a large quantity of circulating coinage existed anywhere in Tudor London, it would be there. But the deeper we dug, the more uncomfortable I became. We were no longer asking simple questions about coinage. We were asking questions about the financial affairs of some of the most powerful merchants in England. That was dangerous. One afternoon, while returning from a meeting with a scrivener near Cheapside, Dale pulled me into a narrow alley between two timber buildings. "Don't look now," he said quietly. "Why?" "We've been followed." I resisted the urge to turn around immediately. Instead, I glanced into a shop window. Sure enough, a man stood half a block behind us. Well-dressed, middle-aged, clean beard, dark cloak, the sort of man who worked with accounts rather than cargo. I lowered my voice. "Guild official?" "Possibly." "What do we do?" Dale smiled slightly. "The same thing we've always done." "What's that?" "Act exactly like merchants." We continued walking. The man followed. Not closely, just close enough. The next morning he appeared again, and the morning after that. Never threatening. Never speaking. Simply watching. By now, Dale and I had both reached the same conclusion. Somebody had noticed us. The confrontation finally came several days later. Business had been unusually good that morning. We were packing away merchandise when a shadow fell across the stall. I looked up. The same man stood before us. This time he was not alone. Beside him stood another gentleman carrying a ledger beneath his arm. Neither appeared armed. That somehow made them more intimidating. The first man offered a polite smile. "Good morrow, masters." Dale nodded. "And to you." The man's eyes moved across our merchandise before settling on us. "I am Master William Harcourt." He paused. "A factor acting on behalf of several merchants of this ward." My stomach tightened. The title explained everything. A factor was a commercial agent, a man who knew everyone's business, and who reported unusual activity. His companion opened the ledger. Harcourt spoke calmly. "You have enjoyed remarkable success for newcomers." "We have been fortunate," Dale replied. "Indeed." The factor's smile never changed. "Yet there remains a matter of curiosity." Neither of us spoke. Harcourt folded his hands. "Why are two merchants from Antwerp asking questions about the merchant's chest?" There it was, the question, direct, unavoidable. For a moment, the sounds of the market seemed to disappear. I could hear my own heartbeat. Dale, however, remained perfectly calm. I was not aware that curiosity was a crime. Harcourt chuckled. "No crime." His eyes narrowed slightly, but unusual. He leaned closer. "The merchant's chest concerns the affairs of respected merchants." A pause. Men become protective when strangers inquire about such matters. I realized then how close we had come to disaster. Had we pushed harder? Had we asked one question too many? We might have found ourselves accused of fraud, or espionage, or worse. Dale gave a small nod. A fair observation. Harcourt studied him. Then, surprisingly, his expression softened. "You seem honest enough." He glanced toward our stall. "Allow me to offer advice." We listened carefully. "If your purpose is coinage, concern yourselves with markets, not chests." He pointed toward the busy streets around us. Thousands of coins pass through London every day. Then he added something that immediately caught our attention. "More interesting pieces may be found in circulation than in any merchant strongbox." Dale and I exchanged a quick glance. The factor noticed. Take an old merchant's advice. He closed the ledger. The moment men begin guarding something, it becomes difficult to obtain. Then he smiled. But ordinary coin passes through everyone's hands. With that, he turned and walked away. His companion followed. Neither looked back. For several moments, neither Dale nor I spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. That was close. Dale nodded. Far too close. What do you think? Dale looked toward the crowds moving through Cheapside, toward the merchants, the apprentices, the laborers, the money changers, and the endless flow of coinage moving through the city. Then he smiled. I think we've been looking in the wrong place. For the first time since arriving in Tudor England, I realized the journal may have been warning us all along. The greatest treasures were not hidden. They were circulating freely through the hands of ordinary people. And that was where our search would remain. In the market. By the end of our third week in London, Dale and I had come to the same conclusion. We had accomplished what we came to do. The merchant's chest remained beyond our reach, and after our encounter with Master Harcourt, neither of us had any desire to attract further attention. Besides, we had learned something far more important. The real treasures of Tudor England were not hidden away behind locked doors. They passed through ordinary hands every single day. Over the course of our stay, we had accumulated a remarkable quantity of coinage through honest trade. Testoons, groats, half-groats, pennies, and countless other pieces had found their way into our money pouches. Many were worn, many were common, but some were exceptional. Exactly the sort of coins collectors dream about finding. As our departure day approached, we sold off our remaining merchandise. The mirrors were among the first items to go. The leather goods followed shortly afterward. Even our merchant cart found a buyer. By the time we finished, all that remained were our clothing, our personal belongings, and several carefully packed leather satchels containing the coins we had acquired. For the first time since arriving in Tudor England, there was no rush, no mystery to solve, no merchant to question, no need to keep looking over our shoulders. That evening we returned to our lodging and enjoyed a proper meal. The food was simple but satisfying. Dale raised a tankard. To surviving Tudor London, I laughed and raised mine, and to not being arrested by guild officials, Dale grinned, or accused of being spies, or ending up in the Tower. That too. For a while we simply sat and enjoyed the moment. The adventure was nearly over. Before retiring for the night, I looked out the small window toward the distant lights of London. Somewhere beyond the darkness lay the markets we had explored, the merchants we had met, and countless stories we would never know. For a brief time, we had become part of that world. The thought stayed with me long after I fell asleep. Before dawn the next morning, while most of London still slept, Dale and I quietly departed the city. The streets were nearly empty. A few laborers moved through the darkness. Bakery ovens were beginning to warm. Church bells marked the passing of another day. But for us, it was time to go home. We followed the same road we had used weeks earlier. Eventually, the city disappeared behind us. The familiar field came into view. The old barn still stood where we had first arrived. The grass moved gently in the morning breeze. Everything looked exactly as we had left it. Dale checked the portable time device. Coordinates confirmed. I smiled. No North Sea this time? He laughed. No North Sea. The device began to glow. Soft blue light spread across the brass casing. Moments later, a familiar portal opened before us. I took one final look at Tudor England. 500 years of history stretched out before me. Then Dale stepped through. I followed. The transition lasted only seconds. When my boots touched solid ground again, I found myself standing in my coin room. Home! The portal collapsed behind us. The familiar smell of books, wood, and coffee replaced the sense of smoke and livestock. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then Dale dropped into a chair. That, he said, was exhausting. I couldn't disagree. Still, there was one task left, the most important task of all. We carried the satchels to the workbench and carefully emptied their contents. Hundreds of silver and copper coins spilled across the desk. The sound alone was magnificent. For the next several hours, we examined every coin one by one. Dates, mint marks, condition, varieties, anything unusual. At first it seemed as though most were ordinary circulation pieces. Then the discoveries began, a remarkably sharp testoon, several exceptionally well-preserved groats, a handful of coins with rare mint marks, others with unusual striking characteristics. One by one, they were set aside. By the time we finished, we had identified at least 24 pieces that would be considered highly desirable by modern collectors. Some were genuinely rare. Others were simply extraordinary survivors, the sort of coins that should not have lasted 5 centuries. We divided the finds equally, half for Dale, half for me. A fair arrangement. After all, neither of us could have completed the mission alone. Only then did I realize how tired I truly was. I headed for the shower, and emerged sometime later looking far less like a Tudor merchant, and far more like myself. When I returned to the coin room, Dale had already changed into modern clothing, and was studying the machine. He looked thoughtful. "Takes a lot out of you, doesn't it?" "It does." He nodded. "I'm going to take a couple of weeks, to rest, to think, and to make sure we don't get ourselves into trouble on the next trip." I laughed. "Probably a wise idea." Dale smiled. "We got lucky this time." I glanced toward the collection of Tudor coins spread across the desk. He was right. We had learned valuable lessons. Some mysteries were best approached slowly. Some questions attracted too much attention. And history was far more complicated when you were standing inside it. As Dale prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "So, Skipper?" I looked up. "What now?" He smiled. "Oh, I have a few ideas." Then he disappeared down the hallway, leaving me alone with a desk covered in 500-year-old history and the certainty that our adventures were only beginning.